Hello and welcome to Stringency classes. First of all, let's give you an apology. Our apology that last week we could not come up with the weekly current affairs video because there were various developing topics. No final conclusion could be drawn about those topics. So we had to postpone the weekly current affairs video section of last week. So this week we are covering the four important topics that has been in news in the last 2 weeks. And yes, I know what is missing right there. What are you searching? The great Afghanistan issue, the Taliban takeover and US withdrawal from Afghanistan. We are going to discuss it in a separate video with complete history of Afghanistan. Alongside, I will also tell you why Afghanistan is known as the graveyard of empires, how British was failed, how the Soviet Union got into Afghanistan, then USSR disintegrated, and now the US. So we will discuss it completely in a separate video, the entire Afghanistan issue. It would be coming up in the next week. So now for this week, we are going to discuss these four important topics that are on your screen right now. The Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, it has published its sixth assessment report. And we are going to discuss about that. And second one is an observation from the Supreme Court of India regarding the criminalization of Indian politics. Third one is a stringency index released by Oxford University in relation to the impact of lockdowns or COVID-induced lockdowns on school closure and education. And the fourth one is related to a report submitted by Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce to the Government of India, suggesting to amend the Section 52 Clause 1 of the Indian Copyrights Act, and how would it influence the access to knowledge in the nation. So these are the topics which we will be covering in the next few minutes. Stay connected and watch the video. So the first topic, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It has released its sixth assessment report titled Climate Change 2021, the Physical Science Basis. The IPCC, it was formed in 1988 as a joint initiative of World Meteorological Organization and United Nations Environment Program. The various objectives of IPCC while it was forming were: IPCC was formed to assess science related to climate change and its impact. That means the environmental science. It is also one of the objectives to predict the future potential problems of climate change on humans, on biodiversity, on economy, and so on and so forth. The third objective was to adopt the best possible adaptation and mitigation ways to deal with the problems arising from climate change. With these objectives, the IPCC releases various assessment reports time to time. The sixth assessment report of the ICC has been released recently. The highlights of the report says Indian Ocean is warming at a very higher rate. It will lead to frequent heat waves and frequent flooding. Severe heat waves compiled with frequent flooding will be enhanced because of Indian Ocean warming. It also said that irreversible climate change is happening in the world right now, which means increase in mean annual precipitation will take place, and if mean annual precipitation will increase, then definitely the season of monsoon in the Indian subcontinent will lengthen. This means flooding will be frequented. Rising sea levels because of, as you know, the melting of glaciers due to high temperature. Sea levels are rise, which will eventually lead to flooding of coastal areas and the submergence of coastal cities like our Mumbai and Chennai, Visakhapatnam as well. So these coastal cities might get submerged because of coastal flooding. Also, melting of glaciers will lead into flooding in the plains. We know that the North Indian plain or the Gangetic plain is drained by the perennial rivers originating from these glacial hilltops of Himalayas. And continuous shifting of these perennial river channels will again lead to the risk of flooding. So what are the factors affecting the climate change? There are two kinds of factors that affect climate change. One is natural factors, the other one is anthropogenic. Anthropogenic means man-made factors. Anthropogenic factors are nothing but the human-induced factors, the artificial factors. Changing physiology of the earth, that means the continental drift. For the earth was formed millions of years ago when the land mass began to drift apart due to plate displacement. This impacts climate change due to the change in position of land mass and water bodies can adversely affect ocean current and winds. The second important natural factor is volcanism. Volcanic eruption emit gases and dust particles that last for a longer period, causing a partial blockade of the sun rays, thus leading to cooling of weathers and influencing weather patterns. It remains the volcanic ash covers as a thick blanket in the atmosphere, preventing insolation of that place, thereby leading to many times of decreasing temperature. Changing carbon sink with various uh, uses, we are frequently converting the carbon sinks into carbon sources. Carbon sinks are getting converted into carbon sources, which would lead to an increase of 5 to 30% of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And this is an alarming cause. 5 to 30% of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere can only be increased because the existing carbon sinks are getting converted as carbon sources. Carbon sinks are nothing but those bodies which absorb carbon, and carbon sources are nothing but those bodies that emit carbon into the atmosphere. Now coming to the anthropogenic factors or the man-made factors. The first one is undoubted, that is the greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases, they absorb the heat radiation from the sun, resulting in an increase in global temperature. Mostly the long waves are getting trapped in the greenhouse gases. When sun rays come to the surface, the sun rays are in short wave length. The sun rays are short wavelength, they can pierce well into through the greenhouse gases and reach the surface of the earth. And when earth radiates back these same sun rays, then they are in long wavelength. So the long wavelength of the radiated rays from the earth's surface get trapped in the greenhouse gases, thereby leading to an increase in the temperature of the earth. Also the atmospheric aerosols. The atmospheric aerosols, we burn fuel, it also releases atmospheric aerosols alongside the gases. So atmospheric aerosols can absorb solar radiation and it increases the temperature of the air instead of allowing the sunlight to be absorbed by the earth's surface. Also changing the land use pattern. Clearing of forests for agriculture, we know that zoom cultivation or shifting cultivation is heavily practiced in the northeastern and also in the northern regions in the Himalayan foothills. Clearing of forests for agriculture decreases the albedo of the area. Albedo is nothing but the reflecting capacity of that particular area. Albedo of the area is decreased, thereby leading to rise in temperatures. Now, what are the various impacts of climate change? The various impacts of climate change are higher temperatures. As we have discussed, that temperatures increase because of the greenhouse gases that are released from various industries, automobiles, and other sources of emission, and hence end up heating up the planet. Wildlife or ecosystem at risk. The rapid change of climate is likely to exceed the ability of many species to adapt to the changing conditions. Experts predict that almost one fourth of the Earth's species will be headed for extinction by 2050 if the warming trend continues at its current pace. Ocean acidification and rising sea levels. As the earth heats up, melting up of glaciers take place, which lead to an increase in sea levels. Further, with the rise in greenhouse gases, with an increment in carbon concentration in the atmosphere leads to enhanced absorption of carbon dioxide in the oceans, reducing the pH of the oceans, hence thereby increasing the acidity of the oceans. Also, the fourth important impact of climate change is increased risk of droughts, fire, and floods. More the temperature, more the evaporation, and more the intensity of drought. Hot temperature along with dry conditions can increase the risk of forest fires. Enhanced evaporation because of more temperature can lead to intense precipitation in the rainy season, leading to severe floods. There are various illness and diseases that can also hamper adversely because of climate change. For example, in 2003, extensive heat waves caused more than 20,000 deaths in Europe and more than 1500 deaths in India alone. Experts predict that if no action is taken, to curtail the global carbon emission, climate change could cost between 5 to 20% of global GDP. In contrast to this, it would cost less than 1% only to lessen the most damaging effects of climate change. Moving on to the next topic, the second topic is criminalization of politics. Supreme Court, while hearing a case in its court, has observed that Indian politics has been deteriorating day after day. Increasing of criminals into the active politics, members of parliament with more criminal cases pending against their names in the courts are coming up with an increased number. So the Supreme Court of India has directed all political parties to publish the criminal history of their fielded candidates on the home page of their websites within 48 hours of their selection. The Supreme Court has also ordered the Election Commission of India to launch a dedicated mobile application for voters to get details of the criminal history of the candidates at the touch of a button. It also directed that a criminal case against any MP or MLA or MLC, any MP or MLA or member of Legislative Council can only be withdrawn after getting the consent of the state high court concerned. So what led to the Supreme Court to take such a hard and rigid stand against this cause? So the cause of concern, as you can see here in the statistics, is from 2004 to 2019, there has been a considerable increase in the members of parliament with criminal cases. In 2004, it was 24%. In 2009, it got enhanced to 30%. In 2014, despite the coming of Lily Thomas case, the judgment of in the Lily Thomas case, it got increased to 34%. And in 2019, a highest increment was made, that is 43% of our MPs, current MPs, hold criminal cases pending against their name in various courts of India. So as I have mentioned, what was the Lily Thomas case? Lily Thomas versus Union of India. In a landmark judgment on 10th of July 2013, in a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court said that any MPs and MLAs or MLCs who are convicted of a crime and awarded a minimum of 2 years of imprisonment, cease to be a member of the House with immediate effect. So this was the statement of Supreme Court changing the Representatives of People's Act and providing for this, that any member who is awarded a minimum 2 years of imprisonment immediately ceases to be a member of that house. So this was the outcome of the Lily Thomas versus Union of India case. So what are the various causes? We will focus on the various causes for criminalization of politics. As it can be seen that the Election Commission of India lacks adequate power. Further, I would also like to divulge the information that the moral code of conduct which is issued to the which has been issued by the Election Commission of India before any election, either state or national election, it is just an obligatory nature. It is not a legal term. Moral code of conduct cannot be challenged legally if it is violated. And such loopholes in law allow a breeding ground for criminals to enter into politics. And also the increasing election expenditure gives a thumbs up for criminals with muscle power and money power to enter into politics. And various committees in the past, the Goswami committee and other committees have recommended, even the second ARC report have also recommended the government of India that partial state expenditure in state funding of elections must be done in order to prevent the rampant corruption that takes place during election. Also, in Indian democracy, role of caste and religion plays a very significant role. And parties, the political parties, they, instead of choosing the person who deserves it, they sell their tickets to persons who can afford it. Moving ahead, we will now look into the Stringency Index. It is with the onset of the pandemic, educational institutions, especially the schools, remained short for quite a longer period of time. In India, they remained short for 503 consecutive days, which is highest in globe. This index is a part of Oxford COVID-19 government response tracker. It has 9 parameters. The parameters are as follows: school closures, workplace closures, cancellation of public events, restrictions on gathering size, closing the public transport, restriction on internal movement, restrictions on international travel, stay at home requirements, and public information campaigns. So with this, taking these 9 parameters into account, the Stringency Index has been published. So India's score in this Stringency Index remains 72 on an average. On an average, India's score remains 72. The best performance of India was in February 2020 February, when the score was 10, and the worst performance of India was in April 2020 when the score was 99. So the lesser the score, the better the index. So with highest score, it can be seen that India implied a very strict lockdown in the month of April 2020. So the various impacts of the closure of educational institutions, and one of the very significant impact was it enhanced the digital divide. There are various children who are poor, coming from poor households, coming from low regions, having not having adequate supply of electricity, not getting internet adequately. Their learning has been adversely affected and widened the digital divide among from those who have all these facilities. Very many students are there who cannot afford a digital devices like your smartphone, laptop, etc. Even students are living in such regions where connectivity, internet connectivity is a dream. There are also very many students reading who don't even have electricity connection in their homes. So it has enhanced the lockdown, the COVID induced lockdown, and leading to the closure of schools, leading to physical classroom teaching, leading to online teaching, and absence of physical classroom teaching has enhanced this digital divide and widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots in the society. There are various concerns associated with it. A report published by the Inter-American Development Bank has observed that in comparison to offline physical classroom reading, in case of online classroom reading, only 27% of the class matters are grasped by the students. Further, the closure of schools has increased the risk of dropout by a factor of 2.5. To counter the days lost due to the lockdown and other adverse impacts, the governments of the day conduct exam with lesser syllabus. That means they trim down the original syllabus to give a way out to the students, but that causes an adverse impact by creating a skill deficit in the nations, and the report cites that India will suffer for decades together because of this skill deficiency which has been caused by trimming down the syllabus. Moving on, the way forward can be necessary infrastructure in developing necessary infrastructure in schools for a safe passage, safe entry and safe exit of students could be a very progressive state. Next, the recommendation of setting up of educational emergency room in each district so that it can coordinate, implement and monitor the local plans. We have observed during the lockdown that many areas or many districts are present in India with less cases of COVID-19, whereas there are quite a few districts or quite a few areas where the impact of the virus has been severe. So, setting up educational emergency room district wise and enabling it to monitor on a local level can help in eliminating or mitigating this problem. If there are less cases in a particular district, or even there are districts which don't have any active cases, schools can open in such districts, whereas if any district with severe cases are there, then schools can remain closed. Further, with the teachers who are not skilled in online teaching need to be upskilled so that students can benefit in the large way. Having said so, we will move into the next topic, that is the access to knowledge. What is access to knowledge? How easily the knowledge present can be accessed by you or can be present before you is called as access to knowledge. Why are we discussing this topic today? In a recently concluded monsoon session of the Parliament, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce recommended the Government of India to redesign the Copyrights Act 1957 in lines of the Berne Convention. What is Berne Convention? Bonn Convention took place in 9th September 1886 at Bonn in Switzerland, where it has legalized the copyright case. That means the creators of any work, literary, music, or anything, have a right over their work and it cannot be produced by anyone else without their consent. Copyright is nothing but a legal term which is used to describe the rights that creators have over their literary and artistic works. So let's understand this in a elaborative manner. Suppose there exists an author, a publishing house. There are various publishing houses. You might be encountering, you might be buying books for your preparation from these various publishing houses are present in the market. So one of the publishing houses will approach an author that we would like to pay you and you write a book for us. So what would be the market domain? This author would be get paid by these publishing houses. These publishing houses will sell this book in the market. The book when sold will garner the profit for these publishing houses and it would also garner royalty for this author. So this cycle will again continue with the profit. The publishing houses will pocket some of the profit for themselves and the rest of them they will again provide it to another author and approach that second author to write another book which would eventually come to the market, and this would lead to literary flourish. But what if this book is pirated? That means photocopies or xerox of this book are available in the market at lower prices. Then the sale of this book will definitely get affected. It will result in lesser profits. It will result in less royalty. Less royalty will disincentivize the author. Less profits will also demoralize the publishing houses to approach another author for publishing another book, and this would again lead to lesser literary advancement in a society. So therefore copyright is an essential method to control this piracy. But question might be arising that we are using these xerox materials, we are using photocopies of the books, even some of the books are very highly priced, and if stringent order would be passed that no one can use any of the photocopies, then it would lead to a monopoly of the publishing houses in the market. So to counter this, we have to know the Indian Copyrights Act that was passed in 1957 in detail. So the Copyrights Act of 1957 authorizes a creator of a work that it can prohibit or authorize anyone to reproduce the work in any of its form, use it for a public performance, make copies or recordings of the work associated, broadcast it in various forms, or translate the same to other languages. So duration of this copyright in case of your literary, dramatic, musical and artistic work remains for a lifetime, and after death of that owner it remains for 60 more years with his family. The cinematographs, films and sound recordings are copyrighted for a duration of only 60 years. So the backdrop of this copyright case, a landmark judgment was passed by the Delhi High Court. There was a photocopy shop named the Rameswari Xerox shop in the premises of the Delhi University. It used to provide course packs to the students. Of the Delhi University. So publishers like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, they approached the Delhi High Court saying that these course packs provided by this Rameswari Xerox shop or the Rameswari photocopy shop is violation of the Indian Copyrights Act of 1957. The publishing houses also filed a case against the Delhi University as this Xerox shop was present inside the premises of the DU. Again, the students and some of the authors, they also approached the Delhi High Court, that citing section 52 clause 1 subclause Section 52, Clause 1, Subclause A of the Indian Copyrights Act of 1957. They said the Section 52, Clause 1, Subclause A provides for a fair use of the copyrighted materials for research and private study. They cited this that the students are not commercially selling those course packs, rather they are using it for their own study materials. So the Delhi High Court, the single George Delhi, in 2012, the Delhi High Court provided for a temporary injunction. Prohibiting the Rameswari photocopy shop not to proceed with course packs for the time being. This temporary injunction was provided in 2012. In September 2016, a single judge bench of the Delhi High Court, it dismissed the petition filed by the publication houses. It completely dismissed the petition filed by the publishing houses. The High Court said copyright, especially in literary works, is not a divine right conferred on authors, giving absolute ownership of their creation. The High Court granted the permission that the copyrighted books can be copied inside and outside the educational institutions as well. Then came in December 2016, a two-judge divisional bench of the Delhi High Court decided that this lawsuit must continue. We will decide about it. We will decide how to proceed with it. Then in 2017, the publishing houses a year later decided to withdraw the petition they filed against this photocopy shop inside the DU premises, and thereby the matter came to a rest. Look, Article 21A, under Article 21A, right to education is a fundamental right. Therefore, access to knowledge is imbibed with right to education and it cannot be hampered with any cost. So what is the section 52 clause 1 that led to dismissal of that petition? The section 52 clause 1 subclause A says that for any fair use dealing for purpose of research and private study. The subclause B says by it the copyrighted material can be used by any teacher or pupil in course of interaction. So who is a teacher? A teacher is not only an individual, a teacher can also be an institution. An educational institution can also be considered as a teacher. And individual teachers can also use the copyright materials for preparing their lectures. In any topic. The students can answer the things mentioned in the copyrighted materials to answer any question in an examination. So what are the recommendations provided by the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce to the government regarding this Copyright Act? The recommendations provided that copyright materials can be used but in a limited number and only in the government-owned educational institutions. That means it prohibited the privately owned educational institutions to hold photocopies of any copyrighted materials. Further, the photocopies of copyrighted books in government-owned educational institutions need to be limited. There must be a specific count on the photocopies, not that it can be printed, the printing can go on and on. Further, the recommendations include to design the Copyrights Act in lines with the Berne Convention. So that's it for today. We will meet again next week with 4 more topics of the week. So have a good day. All the best.